Craig, he could not be identified as either black or white. He was purely an outsider. Berinsky actually described his unique situation by saying, "My benefit was that I was to them a foreigner. I spoke with an accent, was Jewish, right in the black community, so I had many things that they didn't know quite what to do with. It was an advantage that I came as an outsider because I learned out of my Jewish experience very much of my operation here in Mississippi. You know what to expect and what not to expect. You are either inside outside or outside inside, but be aware that you're never inside inside." He used his marginality and understanding of society and its social institutions to build bridges during his lifetime. Ernst Berinsky was born in 1901 in an upper-middle-class secular Jewish family of Upper Silesia. He earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Munich. There's a story to that. In 1924, he received a Doctor of Philosophy degree from the University of Berlin in 1928 and an international law degree from the Academy of International Law at The Hague, the Netherlands. After completing his legal studies and passing the German equivalent of the bar examination, he entered practice with several Jewish fraternity brothers from 1929 to 1937. He served briefly as a judge magistrate in the General Court of Kepler, Germany from 1929 to 1932. He escaped to America. In America, he acquired a master's degree in education from the University of Chicago in 1946 after World War II. He attended Chicago during the period known as the Second Chicago School. I don't know how many sociology majors are in the crowd, but Chicago, for sociology people, be genuflect. It was the first university in America to have a sociology department. It was the first university to establish a journal, the American Journal of Sociology. The leading lights in American sociology, like Robert Ezra Park, Louis Wirth, and others, were on the campus of Chicago. And even today, if you want to get a PhD, Chicago is one of the first schools that you would consider. So Berinsky was in Chicago, a very important place, although he was in education, but there were all these things going on in Chicago. And it was through his contacts with Black Fisk University alumni in graduate school that he became aware of the historically Black institutions associated with the American Missionary Association, such as Tougaloo College. Thus, his application and acceptance of an academic post at Tougaloo was a direct result of those contacts. Stop. I'm a Southerner, so I tell stories. You're hearing this name, Tougaloo, and I'm talking about a Black college, and you may think that Tougaloo is some African name, but it's named for one of the so-called five civilized tribes. And I believe it's a Choctaw Indian word, meaning at the fork of two streams that converge on a certain part of the college. Thus, his application and acceptance of an academic post at Tougaloo was a direct result of those contacts. During his tenure at Tougaloo, he received a Doctor of Philosophy degree from the University of Pittsburgh in 1954. His dissertation focused on civil rights law. Within 9 years of his arrival at Tougaloo, and 2 years after receiving his PhD, Samuel C. Kinchelow, a fellow Chicago School alumnus, noted religious sociologist, was appointed the president of Tougaloo College. As a result, the leading assimilationist ideas of Robert Ezra Park, whom I referred to a few minutes ago, via Samuel Kinchelow, may have influenced Berinsky's thinking. Assimilationist theory was a prominent race relations model that permeated sociological discourse through much of the 50s, 60s, and even into the early 70s. And Robert Park came up with a race relations cycle. And the whole idea behind assimilationist theory, and I'm going off, so you're going to have to do this if I run over time. The whole idea of assimilationist theory was that these European scholars invariably believed that all people who came to America, particularly immigrants, and at this time they were mostly Eastern European immigrants, but immigrants in general, the ultimate goal for them was to assimilate To assimilate to what? Well, they never actually said this, but what they were saying, into white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture. Okay? And as a result of that, they came up with all of these race relations models. And Park had a four-stage race relations cycle. And the end of the cycle, the beginning was contact, competition, accommodation, and assimilation. Okay, and there were various others. Emery S. Bogartis had assimilationist. His had 7 stages, and various other people had this notion. There are other race relations models in sociology, competition theory, the split labor market thesis, and so forth, and they all deal with various aspects of the dynamics of race and ethnicity in American society. So at the time in the 1950s that Kincheloe came to Tougaloo, he had studied under Worth, Park, and others, and brought that to Tougaloo and had conversations with Berinsky. And as a result, this was incorporated in Berinsky's own work. During this period, the prominent Chicago school sociologist Everett Charrington Hughes presented a lecture on the campus of Tougaloo. Along with Louis Worth, Hughes had worked to refine Marxist race relations cycle. Over the years, Berinsky, as I said, incorporated Hughes' views on the need for group solidarity and institution building, especially in the Black community, into his own perspectives on Mississippi race relations. Berinsky's educational training and international socialization provided a unique set of experiences that he shared with his students. It was this background that he brought to the development of the college's sociology program's long and rich history. 30 years after Tougaloo was established in 1869, its first listing of a sociology course appeared in the college's 1899 and 1900 academic catalog. The first consistent listing of sociology courses began in 1911 with a course taught by the college's president, Frank G. Wadsworth. Over the years, the college added more and more sociology courses in a variety of areas. In 1938 and 1939 academic year, the college formally established its social science division, which included 8 sociology courses. The division was established under the leadership of Homer Thurston Larson. After Larson's departure to complete his doctorate at the University of Chicago, Berinsky's arrival on campus was at a key moment in the growth and development of the college's sociology department. The course offerings has expanded to 10 courses with such engaging topics as social evolution, rural sociology, and race relations. With Berinsky's 1947 arrival, the department developed into a strong component of the college's academic program. A part of his development as a sociology department and a part of his contribution as a refugee scholar, serving in the capacity of an interpreter, was the establishment of several unique programs. Lowe suggested the programs or activities were an aspect of developing a free space that served as an important movement center on this small Black college campus. In her opinion, it helped to facilitate collective mobilization and contributed to the development of the civil rights movement in Mississippi. She described Berinsky as a bridge leader who played an important role in the civil rights movement by nurturing links between leaders of formal movement organizations and grassroots community members by helping to frame and articulate the concerns and issues of one group to another. They were liaisons between groups that did not necessarily have direct relationships to advance useful communication. Berinsky worked behind the scenes in a very effective way. He developed close relationships with a few faculty members of Millsaps College, a white private Methodist school in Jackson, Mississippi. Beginning in the 1940s, Millsaps faculty taught history and social science courses as adjunct faculty members at Tougaloo. This arrangement helped the college to expand its course offerings. Starting in 1968, some sociology students took courses on the Millsaps campus, including yours truly, and some Millsaps sociology students took courses at Tougaloo. Millsap's faculty members were campus guest speakers. Berinsky appeared as a guest speaker on the Millsap's campus. For white Millsap's faculty members, their participation in interracial Tougaloo events created great risk in the violent era of Mississippi's segregated politics. Yet Berinsky and Millsap's faculty members, such as Francis Coker, T.W. Lewis, and Marguerite Goodman, continued their relationships throughout the period. Those relationships were part of Berinsky's development of a behind-the-scenes, off-campus networking system in the white and black communities, and on-campus academic programs that included the Tougaloo Social Science Laboratory, Social Science Forums, and United Nations Day. The Social Science Laboratory was founded in 1948 to apply student learning experiences in the social sciences to their daily problems. The laboratory consisted of an office, a small library, and a conference table. With grantsmanship in later years, the basement laboratory was remodeled to provide separate areas for teaching, study, library facilities, kitchen, and offices. The new space helped in maintaining the Communication Center, Correspondence Center of the United Nations for Black Schools in Mississippi, an International Relations section, a Job Exploration Center, and Diagnostic and Self-Study Center. The laboratory provided students with a wide range of literature with various political views. For many students, their very first opportunity to read the New York Times was in the Social Science Laboratory. Similarly, the laboratory was a place where campus guests were introduced to students and classes. In 1954, Berinsky established the Tougaloo Social Science Forums. According to Lowe, the forums were developed as a campus locale where blacks and whites gathered for free dialogue on major social, political, and economic issues. The forums became quite successful once he obtained funding in 1954 from the Field Foundation of Illinois. They were held bi-weekly on Wednesday evenings. Each forum was preceded by an interracial dinner and followed by a discussion session. The size of the audience varied from 20 to 200 participants. The pre-forum dinner guests included local liberals from the white Jackson community, including members of the Jewish community, and moderate white faculty and students from nearby Millsaps College. 2 seminars were conducted in preparation for the forum. The speaker's topic would be integrated into some professors' classes. They often required attendance at the lectures, as I imagine some of you are required tonight. The lectures were limited in time to allow sufficient time for an open discussion. The forum discussion allowed the speakers an opportunity to defend their views from challenges presented by the audience. Prior to 1962, most guest lecturers were from the local area, such as Medgar Evers, the Mississippi State NAACP Field Secretary, Rabbi Perry Nussbaum of Jackson's Temple Beth Israel, Harding Carter, a noted newspaper publisher, and Eudora Welty, the famous Southern writer. As the reputation of the forums became more and more known within and outside of the state, the forums attracted prominent national and international speakers, such as James Baldwin, Ralph Bunche, Otto Nathan, Martin Luther King Jr., Michael Harrington, John Kenneth Galbraith, David Reisman, and Pauline Frederick. You may have heard of some of those names because you've probably heard of King. We have Oliver. And if you're in English or English major, you've probably heard of Baldwin. Some of those other people will be probably better known by anybody over 50 in the audience. But Frederick was a journalist. Reisman was a scholar, academician, best known for a book called The Lonely, one of many books, but he wrote a book called The Lonely Crowd that was very popular in the 50s. Ralph Johnson Bunche was a Nobel laureate. He was the first black undersecretary of the United Nations. Historically in America, we had something called a one-drop thesis, meaning if you had one ancestor of African descent, no matter how white you looked, you were black. So if I were to show you a picture of Ralph Johnson Bunche, you would be hard-pressed to say that he was black, but he called himself black based on that one drop thing. But essentially, he, like many African Americans, had a Creole background, and I know there are probably Haitians in the audience. We're talking Louisiana Creole. Where I live in Rhode Island, we have Creoles who are of Portuguese descent, Cape Verdeans, and they spell it differently from the way the Creoles in Louisiana and Sierra Leone and the rest of the free world, they spell it with an I. And they speak Creole, which is Portuguese patois, like the French patois, but it's Portuguese based. And so he was a Creole to Native Americans, and that was, some African rolling and all that stuff. These speakers often presented new reads on important social issues, such as the critical international perspective the bunch offered the Tougaloo audience. The pre-forum dinners began to include colleagues from neighboring Jackson State College, now university, as well as international scholars in the area. The forums became the subject of negative commentary from the segregated Mississippi press due to the presence of the Sovereignty Commission, a segregationist intelligence group sponsored by the state government. The forums was one of the interracial activities under surveillance by the Sovereignty Commission. Their activities included compiling information on participants and filing reports to be disseminated to the anti-integrationist elements in the white community. This information included the license plate numbers of cars entering and leaving the Tougaloo campus. Lomas suggested the forums showcased Berinsky's outsider role as a Jewish person in a land of Christians to create an atmosphere in which white moderates and blacks might debate the issues of segregation, integration, inequality, and world affairs. In the early 1960s, Berinsky started an annual celebration of the United Nations on the campus. It included a keynote speaker, usually a diplomat or high-ranking member of the United Nations. The speaker would interact with faculty and students in and out of the classroom. Like other campus speakers in the social science forums, faculty members would often require student attendance and integrated discussion of the United Nations into their classes. The significance of the UN Day was not only providing students with exposure to an international figure, but connecting students to a world greater than the provincial state of Mississippi. The UN represented a global worldview, of humanity, reliant on each other for the betterment of society. In the hostile segregationist climate of Mississippi, the UN had little place in its social discourse, with speakers such as Ralph Bunche discussing global issues as well as national issues in their appearances. The UN Day speeches were often cited in works by scholars far away from the small campus. In the 1960s, Berinsky and the sociology department received a Field Foundation grant to establish the Social Science Advancement Institute. A part of the Institute's activities included the establishment of the Freshman Seminar in the Social Sciences, an interdisciplinary course taught by a team of instructors in small seminars and tutorial classes. Students were assigned a series of readings of social science disciplines such as economics, sociology, psychology. At our school, history was not in the humanities, it was a social science, and political science. Guest speakers such as the noted Caribbean scholar C.L.R. James were invited to the campus by the Institute. The general topic of the freshman social science seminars was contemporary American civilization with an emphasis on the African American experience. Through his innovative academic programs, Berinsky had an indirect impact on the burgeoning civil rights movement by providing avenues for interracial exchanges. While the modern-day civil rights movement transformed the nation's race relations in profound ways, its impact on the state of Mississippi brought the state out of the dark ages into the bright light of the modern era of human relations. Tougaloo students played a pivotal role in the Mississippi movement. 1 year after the famous Greensboro sit-in, the first Mississippi sit-in was staged by 9 Tougaloo students at the Jackson, Mississippi Public Library. I made a joke in a workshop the other day with some public school teachers that it was actually the sit-in that almost no one knew about. Because I don't know if you know anything about Mississippi, but a whole lot of white Mississippians were not hanging out in the library. So, except for the fact that they had made a point to have news reporters, TV people, radio people there, those 9 people could sit in that library and no one would have known. But they did, and they promptly were arrested. From that action, the civil rights movement began. It launched a political movement that had a far-ranging impact on the state and the nation. Those 9 students dared to attack the closed society of Mississippi. Notwithstanding recent political efforts by Mississippi conservative white politicians to restrict voting rights, as has been the trend of several states across the country due to certain political and racial interests, including your dear state of Florida, the civil rights movement allowed a greater level of black participation in state affairs in all areas. This was most in evidence after the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. By 1989, Mississippians had elected more African American state officials than any other state in the Union, including a state Supreme Court judge, who was the Tougalooman, a congressperson, who was the Tougalooman, 22 state legislators, 25 mayors, 70 county supervisors, and 282 city council members. This political achievement was derived from the direct political action campaign of young students, college students I may add, within the state and across the South. In Mississippi, Tougaloo served as a staging ground for many of the civil rights campaigns of the Congress of Federated Organizations, also known as COFO. Formed in 1962, it was an umbrella organization composed of the representatives and chapters of national civil rights organizations, such as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Congress of Racial Equality, and most notably, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, better known as SNCC. The purpose of COFO was to administer funds from the Southern Regional Council's Voter Education Project. It invested its time and energy in registering black voters. It remained a viable entity for more than 2 years. All of the organizations sponsored activities in various communities throughout the state during the early 1960s, especially during the 1964 Freedom Summer Project. Elizabeth Southern described the Freedom Summer Project as being a 5-pronged assault on the status quo of Mississippi. The assault focused on the following: 1, voter registration and the organization of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. 2, the operation of freedom schools. 3, the establishment of community centers for blacks. 4, the White Community Project. And 5, federal programs to research and bring aid to the black community. While Southern's summary of the Freedom Summer Project may be an accurate report of the movement leaders' objective, most of the civil rights workers came to assist blacks in voter registration, inform blacks of their rights as American citizens, and to integrate public facilities. At the end of the summer, they had managed to register 1,200 blacks and established 41 freedom schools and community centers. The 1964 Freedom Summer Project was the most important of the Mississippi civil rights movement's activities. The media focused on the civil rights movement activities of Mississippians with a greater intensity that summer than it had focused on it ever before. Thereby, the media fulfilled some of the expectations and desires of some of the project's sponsors. As a result, the racial violence, which was so common in the state, became the focus of national and international attention. During the summer of 1964, 52 people were beaten or injured in Mississippi. 250 people were arrested, 4 people were wounded by gunshots, 13 black churches were destroyed by fire, and 3 civil rights workers, Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner, and James Chaney, were murdered. As the activities of the COFO took place, the leading white liberal organization in the state, the Mississippi Council on Human Relations, began to take shape. Berinsky played a role in this organization. In 1963, he chaired one of 2 discussion groups for the organization. His involvement with the Human Relations Council was a part of his cultivation of cross-racial ties within Mississippi's white liberal community. An influential figure and leader of the Human Relations Council was Rabbi Charles Mantenbaum of Temple B'nai Israel in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Although a native Southerner, Mantenbaum attended undergraduate and graduate school in the East, specifically New York. During his period of study, he participated in integrated settings. Returning south, he continued to freely interact with blacks, much to the chagrin of many segregationists. His leadership of the Human Relations Council was one of several activities in which he engaged to promote better race relations, including lecturing in black colleges throughout the South. He attended regularly the Tougaloo Social Science Forums, as did his Jackson, Mississippi colleague, Rabbi Perry Nussbaum. Both rabbis were friends of Borinsky. In 1967, Rabbi Nussbaum's Temple Beth Israel was bombed in September. Several months later, his home was bombed in November. It was believed by some that the bombings were a direct consequence of the rabbi's well-known stance in support of civil rights and integration. Unlike his counterpart, Mantenbaum, Nussbaum was a Northerner who was reared in Toronto, Canada, and received his rabbinical training in Cincinnati. He was a founding member of the Interfaith Committee of Concern, which was a group that raised funds to rebuild black churches destroyed during the Freedom Summer. Nussbaum and Mantenbaum were the types of individuals that Borinsky worked to expose his students as examples of another side of white Mississippi, especially Nussbaum's work as a Jackson, Mississippi resident. As suggested in John Salter's work on the Jackson, Mississippi Civil Rights Campaign, much of the work was sponsored by young student activists based at Tougaloo. Most of the civil rights activity at Jackson was promoted by the so-called Jackson Movement. The Jackson Movement activities were sponsored by the North Jackson NAACP Youth Council, which included high school students, Tougaloo NAACP Chapter, Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance, Baptist Ministers Union, Citizens Committee for Human Rights, Tougaloo College Administration, and the Council of Women's Organizations. Many of Borinsky's students were not only political activists, but student leaders on the small college campus were involved actively in the Jackson movement. These individuals included Joyce Ladner, who was a recipient of the Student Citizen of the Year Award at Tougaloo and served in leadership capacities in campus organizations such as her sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. As the Dean of Pledgees of Delta, she had her little sisters participating in voter registration campaigns in the black community. She was among the top 3 SNCC students arrested in protest demonstrations during her college years. Along with her sister Dory, she worked as an organizer and fundraiser for the famous 1963 March on Washington. In fact, the Ladner sisters were present at nearly every major civil rights event of the era. Ladner was one of Borinsky's best students who reflected his role as a retailer of knowledge. After graduating from Tougaloo in 1964, she went on with Borinsky's encouragement to take a PhD from Washington University in St. Louis. If Tougaloo's sociology department makes any claim that its graduates have a tradition of scholarship through publishing, Ladner's publishing record stands out. On numerous lists, she ranks in the top 10. In 1996, she was ranked number 5 among all black sociologists. And she ranked 9th among the top 12 black sociologists cited by scholars in selected introductory, social problems, and race relations textbooks. She ranked 9th among black sociologists cited in the Social Science Citation Index. Her sociological career was noted by the publication of numerous important works, including the publication of her dissertation in the tome Tomorrow's Tomorrow. It continues to be an important reference work on young black women's life experiences. She served as the president of the Eastern Sociological Society and interim president of Howard University. She continued her social activism as a Clinton appointee to the controversial DC Financial Control Board. She claimed her community commitments were an extension of Borinsky's influence on his students to be engaged in their communities. In the background of the movement activism of his students, Dr. Borinsky stood as a mentor who encouraged them to continue their education. It is reported that he arranged for students to have course material delivered to the jails in order for them to keep abreast of their class studies. In addition, he proved to be a minor threat to the system of segregation in very indirect ways. Over the years, he challenged segregation via his limited scholarly publications and lectures around the state and in neighboring states. In 1963, he gave an impassioned, impromptu talk at the business session of the Mississippi Sociological Society, which was meeting on the campus of Millsaps. He pointed to a white student whom he had brought along to the meeting, an exchange student from Brown University. Tougaloo established a long, ongoing exchange program that will be celebrating its 50th anniversary with Brown University in the early 60s. But it had many exchange programs throughout the nation with other colleges such as Ripon, Oberlin, and so forth. My Tougaloo students, according to Borinsky at the meeting, said, "My Tougaloo students know where I am today. They know I brought this student. They know I did not bring them. I can no longer attend on this basis." Essentially, he was saying he could no longer attend the segregated sociological society meeting. He invited the organization to hold its next meeting on the Tougaloo campus. The next meeting would be held in the momentous year 1964, and they agreed. According to James Lowen, Borinsky developed an event with nationally known sociologists from outside the state as plenary speakers. Only one graduate student from all-white Mississippi State University and white sociologists from the University of Mississippi, known as Ole Miss, attended the event. By the time they attended the event, James Merriman had integrated the University of Mississippi, so they were somewhat free to go to those sorts of events. Throughout the 1960s, Borinsky was kept under surveillance by the white segregationist intelligence agencies of Louisiana and Mississippi, the Louisiana and Mississippi State Sovereignty Commissions that I referred to earlier. In 1958, local Jackson newspapers acknowledged this surveillance as a result of his participation as a speaker in a Millsaps forum with the Reverend Dr. Glenn Smiley of the Fellowship of Reconciliation. The Mississippi Sovereignty Commission's archives indicate that its Louisiana counterpart reported on Borinsky's speech at an American Friends Service Committee program during its annual Institute of Religion in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The Sovereignty Commission and the White Citizens Council, now known as the Conservative Citizens Council, played a major role in the maintenance of segregation and anti-black sentiment within Mississippi. Borinsky that's why at these Conservative Citizens Council meetings, they have these sometimes bizarre sessions where discussions of race come up and people have some, for lack of a better descriptor, very antiquated views about race and the construction of race, and I would argue racist views. That organization emanated from a purely racist group, the White Citizens Council, before it became the Conservative Citizens Council. Borinsky maintained strong relationships with some whites in the state and the region. In the Jackson area, these included leading religious figures in the Roman Catholic and Jewish communities, such as Father Joseph Bernini, who later became the bishop of the state. And as I've mentioned, Rabbi Perry Nussbaum, owing to his secure institutional base, Borinsky was able to present views on race and religion that other whites in the state would not or could not voice. As a result of Borinsky's invitations, Bernini, Nussbaum, and other whites in the Jackson area made appearances on the campus, seeing for themselves the intellectual and social reality of African American students. In his own written work, he suggested the civil rights movement afforded blacks an opportunity to express themselves while reflecting particular aspects of organizations. Following the end of the direct action campaigns of the early 1960s, the civil rights movement, I enrolled in Tougaloo College. My introduction to Ernest Borinsky was via a long letter sent to him during the summer preceding my enrollment at Tougaloo College. I had received an acceptance letter in the spring of 1970, contingent on my completion of my high school graduation requirements. Tougaloo College is one of approximately 20 schools that I applied to over the academic year. Having spent my entire life in the Deep South, I view college as an opportunity to leave the parochial community of Magnolia, Mississippi, 2,500 people, and see a richer and more engaging world. This perspective had grown out of seeing my older siblings leave home for college. As the youngest of 3 children with a brother 6 and 5 years older, I had the experience of hearing their tales about college life at historically black colleges in the early and mid-1960s. To me, their stories of dormitory life, fraternity and sorority activities, freshman orientation week, intercollegiate sports, plays performed by visiting companies such as the Free Southern Theater, as well as productions staged by the college acting groups at Jackson State and Tougaloo, band concerts, international and national speakers, and concert artists such as Pete Seeger, Ralph Bunche, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, Alice Walker, Jones Baez, and others were absolutely fascinating to me. Given my parents' own stories about their college days in the 1940s and 50s, my mother meeting Mary McLeod Bethune of famed Bethune-Cookman University here, and the prospect of attending college was very heady for me. In a bit of an overambitious move, I began writing for college catalogs in my junior year of high school. My father's ongoing joke when he would come home from teaching in Louisiana would be, "Where are you going to college today?" The sad reality of the situation was that my desires were very much circumscribed by the limited opportunities available to young black boys in the Deep South. For most black students of the era, black colleges and universities were the only options available for higher education. In most instances, the public institutions were the most financially feasible for students. Both of my parents were scholarship students and products of public institutions. My father graduated from Southern University in Agricultural and Mechanical College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and my mother graduated from Jackson State College for Negroes, as it was known in 1951 when she received her degree. And that was not only at Jackson State, but Virginia State College for Negroes, North Carolina College for Negroes in Durham. And it was important for these Southern segregationist governments to indicate that these people had a Negro college education, not comparable to white people. Nevertheless, my views were skewed a bit by an experience that my parents and a favorite aunt, who worked as a maid in the home of a wealthy New York Jewish family, had given me during my junior high and senior high school years. Through that aunt, I was given the opportunity to attend summer camp in upstate New York. The idea of sending me away for summer camp was derived from my neighbors who sent their children to summer camp. Like my parents, who were public school teachers, my neighbors and schoolmates were sent to summer music camps in New York and Michigan. With this idea in mind, I asked my parents about attending summer camp, and my aunt contacted a cousin who worked as deputy director of youth programs in New York City. And the process began for me to attend 2 summer camps over several years during my junior high and high school summers. This experience gave me my first exposure to non-Christian and non-Southern young people who did not have the Southern racial provincialism that I was so very accustomed to as a child. Simultaneously, it provided me with exposure to the Mecca of Black America, Harlem, at a significant point in African American history. The Civil Rights movement was in full swing when I first went to summer camp. By the time I completed my camping experience, it had made a transition from an integrationist movement to a black nationalist movement, and black power was in. 2 summers prior to first attending summer camp in New York, Freedom Summer volunteers were in Mississippi. During that summer, my county experienced approximately 100 cross burnings by local white citizens and Klansmen. In addition, over 4 churches and 16 homes were bombed or burned to the ground in my county. It was known as the church bombing capital of the state. My father and other men in our family's Baptist church stood guard at night with shotguns to protect our church. This was an arduous task for men who held 9-to-5 jobs during the day. The decision to send me away for the summer camp experience was considered in the context of the American brand of terror that permeated the South at that time. Middle-class Black parents were opting to provide their children with safer summer environments that helped to provide young people with organized activities during the summer months. To be in New York at that time as a young Black boy was a rich and unusual adventure. Needless to say, my return to Mississippi was always a difficult one for me. Every time I stepped off the plane, I knew what it meant in terms of whom and what I was in life. Mississippi, even in the mid and late 1960s, was still a place that defined Black people in a negative way and treated them with contempt and hostility. As you stepped off the plane, you knew that your life meant very little to most of the whites in authority in the state. Thus, you had to govern yourself accordingly. During my graduate school years in Harvard, I remember attending a going-away party for a very close friend from South Africa. He had completed his coursework in comprehensive PhD examinations in anthropology and was returning home to collect his dissertation data. As we all sat around in an apartment imbibing alcohol and other things, and enjoying the delectable African dishes prepared in celebration of his return to the motherland, he sat quietly in the corner with little or no engagement with us. I knew exactly how he felt. Every summer before I returned to Mississippi for approximately 2 weeks, I went into this emotional tailspin. I felt anxiety about returning south in a world that dehumanized my people on a regular basis with the full sanction of the state and, I must add, national governments. Thus, the summer camp experience broadened my horizons on a number of levels, including exposure to many camp counselors who attended some of America's leading universities, such as Dartmouth College, the University of Chicago, Columbia University, University of Pennsylvania, Queens College, City College of New York University, Brandeis University, and the list goes on. By the time of the camp experience, my older siblings were graduating from college and entering graduate schools themselves. My brother had been featured in the Wall Street Journal after winning a prestigious Stanford Fellowship, the first in the college's history, and the first African American in the state of Mississippi to win such a fellowship. After spending undergraduate summers at Woods Hole Marine Biological Laboratory and the Brookhaven National Laboratories, he enrolled in a biology PhD program at Brown University. His enrollment in the New England Ivy League graduate school made the adventure of leaving home an even more attractive prospect. During my camp days, I met an older camp counselor, Stanley Miller, a Harlem native who became something of a big brother to me. He was a social worker in the city who later became a municipal judge in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, after acquiring a law degree from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. At the time that I was considering college, his social work employment provided him with information about college opportunities. Through his assistance, he arranged for me to be interviewed by a special consulting group that aided minority students in applying to college. They provided me with a list of schools and encouraged me to write away for applications. Returning to Mississippi, I followed their instruction. In addition, my friends sent applications for various schools that he received as a social worker. As a result of these contacts and experiences, I applied to the huge number of schools that I told you about. Unfortunately, I was not encouraged to apply to any schools other than local schools by my parents and my high school counselor. My friend had sent applications for schools such as Cornell, Wisconsin, Yale, etc. These institutions were beyond the realm of possibilities for any of the Black people within my sphere. In fact, my father applied and was accepted to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology after World War II, but chose a very different path. Thus, my applications to most out-of-state schools were half-hearted efforts, often after the deadline. Given the feeble attempt on my part, I'm uncertain whether I would have had different outcomes. For the most part, my late submissions were not accepted by schools, and those in which I received acceptance did not offer financial aid because I failed to meet the deadline for financial applications. This was the case of the school of my dreams, which is a small, non-traditional liberal arts college in the Midwest that was featured on television in the special Antioch College. To my surprise, I was admitted to the college. However, I received no financial aid. The college cost almost 3 times as much as Tougaloo College. Without financial assistance, my parents could not afford to send me away to Ohio for schooling. On the other hand, I received acceptance with financial aid from all of the historically black colleges to which I applied, and I had a range of schools to choose from among black colleges, yet they were all based in the South. I chose Tougaloo because my brother, high school counselor, that didn't advise me to apply anyplace else, and high school librarian, who were all important people in my life, had graduated from either Tougaloo Preparatory High School or the college. My brother, who was an early admission scholarship student, entering from the 11th grade, was a member of the class of 1967. With my family members, I attended his baccalaureate and commencement services on the campus. The commencement speaker was the noted black historian, Dr. John Hope Franklin, although I remember absolutely nothing from the speech. The impressive litany of his credentials stayed with me as a child. It was a small and intimate place that reminded me of a family setting. When my brother came home as a part of a Brown recruitment effort for black graduate students, he encouraged me to consider Tougaloo as a viable option for college study. Just as I'd written diligently to colleges and universities in my junior year of high school regarding applications and catalogs, I felt I should contact someone at Tougaloo once I was accepted to tell them about my impending arrival, to prepare them for me. I thought I should write someone regarding my interest in sociology. So I wrote this letter in the summer of 1970. I reviewed the college catalog and discovered Ernest Borinsky was the chairperson of the social science division and chairperson of the small sociology anthropology department. Immediately I sat down at our dining room table with our old Smith Corona portable typewriter and drafted a letter explaining my interest in sociology and possibly becoming a social worker like my New York friend who had gone to NYU School of Social Work. I requested reading material in preparation for my study. Borinsky responded with a very long letter. He welcomed me as a new student. He insisted that I come to his social science laboratory when I arrived on campus, and he sent me a volume of essays, Black Perspectives on America. To be perfectly honest, I really did not expect to receive a reply. In my mind, I was a mere high school student from a small country town who was writing of all things to a PhD with a foreign name that was far too sophisticated to deal with someone like me. I knew he taught courses not only in sociology, but in German and Russian on the campus. Thus, he had to be an intellectual in a realm too great to stoop to my level. In my mind, my camp friends who lived in suburban New York neighborhoods, like Great Neck, and had professional parents that traveled to Europe on summer vacations and attended competitive public and private high schools such as Philston and Bronx Science, would have been the types of students who received letters from college professors, but not young boys from a segregated high school in Magnolia, Mississippi. To receive the letter was more than a pleasant surprise. It was somewhat of a shock. To receive a book with the letter was simply more than I could believe. If I had reservations about attending Tougaloo rather than the school of my dreams, the Borinsky correspondence changed all of that in my mind. I responded with a thank you note and promised to see him on my arrival on campus. After settling into my dormitory following my parents' departure from the campus, I made a beeline to Borinsky's office. It was a cluttered basement office filled with books, newspapers, magazines, dirty coffee cups, and every manner of reading matter. I saw a number of images of replicas of owls and around the room. He invited me to have a seat and began a casual but thorough investigation of my background by asking about my pre-college reading, a bit about my family background, and my interest in sociology. At the close of his polite interrogation, he offered me a job as his research assistant in the social science laboratory. He explained my responsibilities, which would include assisting with his voluminous correspondence in the traditional European style, as well as preparation for his courses, such as checking out library materials, placing material on reserve, we didn't have Xerox back then, mimeograph copies, etc. During the early inquiry, he asked about my typing skills. I had informed him that I could type up to 95 words a minute with errors and 45 words without errors. Oddly, I was quite embarrassed by my typing skills, but several high school classmates had speeds over 100 words a minute without errors or very few errors. I was one of the slow ones. However, Borinsky was pleased enough with my proficiency that he used me throughout my 4 years of college. Years later, I learned that the research assistant position was not only a coveted position at the college, but it had been held by some rather famous people, including the late Dr. Memphis Norman. Norman came to Tougaloo from an itinerant sharecropping family that originated in Alabama, but eventually found its way to various Mississippi small towns and to various levels of economic success and failure. His father suffered from alcoholism. As a result, he uprooted the Norman family several times throughout young Memphis's life. Due to his father's unreliability in maintaining a steady job, the main and consistent breadwinner in the household was his mother, a domestic worker. This familial instability shaped his life in profound ways. At some point in his academic career, he was shepherded in high school toward college enrollment by black teachers and a principal, who also happened to have been a sharecropper's son, who recognized his intellectual talents. As a result, he was encouraged to take a standardized examination, the same one that my brother took, for an early admission program into Tougaloo, and his scores resulted in his admission to the program and a scholarship. After arriving in Tougaloo, he met Borinsky, who chose him as a research assistant in the social science laboratory. According to Norman, Borinsky had a powerful impact on his life via the exchange of ideas about race relations and other important issues of the day. Through those exchanges and other encounters at Tougaloo, he became an active member of SNCC and participated in numerous sit-ins. He is best remembered for a photograph that I can't show you at the first Woolworth sit-in in Jackson, Mississippi. In the photograph, he is on the floor being stomped on by two local white racist bullies, Benny Oliver and Red Hydra. And it's a horrible shot. And all these white people standing around laughing and grinning and cheering on this guy. And if you know anything about head injuries, the blood is just profuse. And it was an awful scene. It's amazing the guy lived through it. But according to Norman, the experience of being stomped on in a department store was more frightening to him than his Vietnam War experience during the 1968 Tet Offensive. Immediately after graduation from Tougaloo in 1964, he acquired a master's degree in public administration from the University of Pittsburgh. He worked in several governmental agencies, and subsequently he took a doctorate of public administration from the University of Southern California's Washington Public Affairs Center in 1988. Thus, I was walking in the footsteps of Norman and other outstanding young Tougaloo scholars who were chosen to work aside Borinsky. My recent discovery of Norman's special connection with Borinsky was part of the rich history of his relationship with a number of successful students. In the words of the closing line of the movie Casablanca, the first meeting with Borinsky was the beginning of a beautiful relationship. Over my 4 years at Tougaloo, he became a mentor, role model, and dear friend. The relationship was always one of boundaries. Neither of us crossed those boundaries. Once I was asked whether we rose when Borinsky entered the classroom, as was the custom in the German universities, and I said no. Then I remembered that we did rise when he entered the classroom. It was not until I remembered taking an organization and institutional behavior course with him in my sophomore year that I remembered standing as he entered the class. I was a lower level student in an upper level course. He entered the room and the upperclassmen told me to rise in respect for Dr. Borinsky. In the height of the so-called Black Power era, Borinsky's presence garnered that level of respect from his Black Tougaloo College students. In fact, I was embarrassed that I did not know that I was supposed to stand up like everybody else. Consequently, the formal boundaries of the European academician were never breached in our relationship. He exposed me to what the intellectual enterprise may entail. On so many levels, he was different from anyone that I'd ever known. He was the first person that I met who had a photographic memory. He was the first person who who I had known that had such an extensive breadth of travel. He was the first person I met who had fluency in multiple languages. He spoke, obviously, Yiddish, German, Polish, French, Spanish, and it's one other language I'm missing. I mentioned German, I'm sure, German. It may have been Italian. And he was fluent in them. He didn't just beat them up every time he approached them. He was the first judge that I'd ever met, and the list goes on. To meet such a person at a young and impressionable age was an important step in my own personal growth. It laid bare the possibility of what the world could offer you. Berinsky's life accomplishments reminded me that the attempts to circumscribe people based on religion, race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality did not have to limit what you accomplished in life. Most importantly, he verbally encouraged me to be the best that I could be. He made me feel that I was as strong a student as any in Mississippi, black or white. It was part of the Tougaloo tradition to motivate students in such a way. Throughout my graduate school years, I constantly wrote and called and relied upon his counsel. As I collected my dissertation data on white Southern liberals in Mississippi and North Carolina, it was Berinsky's intimate knowledge of those communities from his work experience at white Southern universities during the summers at Duke University and Vanderbilt University that led me in my intellectual pursuit of this topic. He not only provided contacts in Mississippi and North Carolina, but helped me to frame my research in a critical way. Similarly, he provided advice on other aspects of negotiating the world of graduate study well beyond the cloistered walls of Tougaloo. Most important, he encouraged me all along the way. It meant a great deal to have his confidence in my abilities. I always knew he had my best interests at heart. With his death in 1983, I lost more than a mentor. I lost a true friend. I conclude with Berinsky's own words about his life and contributions to Tougaloo. My role was the good fortune of entering into a situation wherein I could best use my talents. I had not only a sense of mission, but also a sense of enjoyment in doing what I did to help Tougaloo play a significant role in improving human relations in the future. Berinsky's comments not only speak to his personal beliefs about the power of agency in creating a better world through the transmission of knowledge, but it was an important signifier related to understanding what Bostein's lecture in a recent discussion of the unknown promise experienced by Exile scholars. Part of his experiences was the hope and expectation of being allowed to enjoy a new country's opportunities, unencumbered by the horrible aspects of the past. Despite the particular vagaries of Mississippi's special brand of segregation, Berinsky's American experience was filled with a variety of new and engaging opportunities, not the least of those being educational training in some of America's leading academic institutions and encountering the Jim Crow South through the prism of the Black College, where he made an invaluable contribution to me and others. Thank you.